Planter boxes are pretty handy and you can put them wherever you want. And by building them yourself, you can make them to a size that suits. I'll show you how to build one easy as. Now there's a couple of different types of timber that we can use to make our planter boxes. One is treated timber and the other is non-treated timber. So our treated timber that I've got here is just 200 by 50 retaining wall timber, H4 treated. That'll last forever outdoors. This is fantastic for making planter boxes if you don't want to put edible plants in it. If you do want to use this type of timber and you want to put edible plants within it, I suggest that you put polythene to line the walls of it, just to stop any product leaching into your soil. Now I'm going to be using the Mitre. It does have a high oil content in it, so it will last a long time outside. And to put these together, I'm going to be using these 125mm long landscape screws. And to make our planter boxes a lot more portable, that way if I'm on a porch situation or a back deck or on a driveway, I can roll around my planter boxes quite easily. I'm going to put casters underneath it. Now I'm going to be building my planter box 1.2 metres long by 600mm wide. Now, because I am using rough sawn timber, it's really important that you do measure each individual board because they're not exactly the same width. So in my situation, I've got 3 boards wide is going to be my base. So now I know I'm 590mm wide by 1.2 metres long. So I can cut my base, sides and ends to length. Okay, all my timber's pre-cut. I'm just about ready to assemble my first layer of the planter box. I'll start by measuring up for my screws. So I'm just going to mark the centre of my timber and square a line all the way over. Square that down just to make sure everything looks nice and pretty. Come up 35mm from the bottom and 35mm down from the top. And just do the same for the other side. Now, it doesn't matter what sort of timber that you are using, it's always a good idea to pre-drill the ends of your timber. You don't want that timber to split. Line that up and just pulse your drill as you use it. Now, just do the same for the other side. Now, just before I put my baseboards on, I'm just going to measure my diagonals on my box just to make sure that I'm perfectly square. So 1342 and that's 1341, so that's pretty good. Right, so I can start laying my baseboards on. Okay, so I'm going to use my landscape screws again to attach the bottom of our boards. So I'm just going to come in about 25mm, which is half the thickness of my timber. And I'm just going to finger gauge a line all the way along. I'll put 2 screws in each. And I'm going to put some screws down the side as well. So I'll just put a mark 25mm in approximately. And get a few screws in there. Just make sure you don't hit any of your screws that you've already got going through the side. So we're just going to bring that in just slightly. Then screw it on and continue along the other sides. Now I'm going to be putting caster wheels on the corner of our unit. I've got 2 that are locking and 2 that are non-locking. The only difference is cost. A little bit more expensive for our locking ones. So what I'm going to do is line up the holes in our casters with the lines I've already put there, and I'm putting in these 30mm hex head screws. Now just repeat the same for the other 3. Okay, so I've finished my base unit and I've flipped that over. Now what I'm going to do is build a 600 by 600 unit that just sits on the top here, and I'm also going to build another unit just like that on wheels that's going to sit next to it. So what I've done is pre-cut and pre-drill my length by 590s. Now obviously you can build yours as high as you like, take it up as big as you like, depending on what sort of plants you're going to put in there. Put in some landscape screws. So I'm going to need to attach our two together. To do that, I'm going to use some battens. Now, I've got an overall height of 400 millimetres, so I'm going to cut some battens about 300 millimetres long that are going to be about 15 millimetres wide. So I've got an offcut of my Mitre here. So I'm just going to mark 300 millimetres. Square that across. Now you can go as thick as you like with your batten. What I'm going to do is go approximately about 15 millimetres. That way I can use my same screws to attach it as I did for my casters. So I'm just going to set my square to 15 millimetres. Okay, so I'm just going to use my battery-powered circular saw to do this. I've already clamped it to my table, so I'm nice and safe, ready to rip into it. So I'm going to need about 3 of these battens, 1 for each side. So after each pass, I'm just going to mark that again. What I'm going to do is put 4 screws in. So without getting too fussy, let's just roughly even that out. 2 screws in each board. And then might as well just get that nice and straight for centre. And we'll pre-screw our holes just so I can take it into the inside. It's just going to make it a little bit easier for me. I'm just going to use my quick grip to clamp our boxes together just to make sure they're nice and tight before I go in and screwing them together. Now we'll just do exactly the same for the 2 sides. I've got my little block plane here, and the last thing I need to do is put an arris on the outside just to take off all these sharp edges. You know, planter boxes, quite often people sit on the edges of them, so with rough sawn timber there's usually a fair bit of splinters on the edge, so you just want to knock those rough edges off. Now, like I said earlier, Mitre does have a high oil content in it, so it will last for years outside. But I'm also going to put in some polythene just to protect it, to increase its longevity. Then I'll add some drainage holes to the base using my 13mm drill bit. Okay, so I've made my main planter box, and I've made another one 600 by 600 using exactly the same method. So really all I'm going to do is just attach it to the other one using 100mm long bugle screws. Pretty much essentially the same screws but a little bit shorter. And finally, you can leave the timber natural or stain, oil or paint to suit. And that's all there is to it. We've got a nice mixture of plants in there which look great against the charcoal stain. And by building it with caster wheels, you can move it around to wherever you want. They were easy as to build, and you can see how you can pretty much make them to whatever size or shape that suits your place. And if you like what you've seen, subscribe to the Mitre YouTube channel for more handy content, or click here to watch some now.